The divorce papers arrived at 9:17 a.m., sealed in a thick white envelope, stamped and signed, placed gently on the glass desk outside the managing partner's office in Midtown Manhattan. Nathan Cole was not there to receive them. He was still in a luxury hotel suite downtown, curtains half drawn, city lights spilling across silk sheets, his phone face down beside him. The night before, he had laughed easily, confident, untouchable. He believed his life was perfectly divided. Work in one hand, pleasure in the other, and a pregnant wife at home who would never dare to leave. Across the city, Elena Brooks stood alone in a quiet apartment in Queens. The radiator clicked. A mug of coffee sat untouched on the counter, her belly pressed gently against the fabric of her sweater as the baby shifted, unaware that everything had already changed. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not call him. Instead, she checked the delivery confirmation on her phone. Delivered. Signed for. Received. That envelope was not sent in anger. It was sent in clarity. For months, Elena had been invisible, her name removed from accounts, her career paused for the baby, her opinions dismissed as hormones. Nathan had mastered the art of control without ever raising his voice. He told her it was love. He told her it was protection. He told her she should be grateful. And she almost believed him. At Nathan's office, assistants whispered when they saw the return address. Legal? Personal. Urgent. One of them hesitated before knocking on the frosted glass door, unaware that this single knock would begin the collapse of a man who thought consequences were for other people. Elena sat down slowly on the edge of her bed and placed a hand over her stomach. "I chose us," she whispered, "even if he never did." In that moment, she knew something Nathan didn't. He thought the divorce papers were the beginning of a fight. But for Elena Brooks, they were the final move of a game she had already won. And Nathan Cole was about to learn the truth in the most public way possible. What Nathan didn't know was that the envelope carried more than divorce papers. It carried proof that would destroy everything he built. Nathan Cole had built his mornings to feel untouchable. At 10:02 a.m., he walked into his Midtown office tower, suit perfectly pressed, expression calm, phone already buzzing with congratulatory messages about the deal expected to close that afternoon. From the outside, everything about his life signaled control, money, influence, a name that opened doors without questions. He didn't notice the envelope right away. He dropped his briefcase beside the desk, loosened his tie slightly, and glanced at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the view he believed he had earned. This was the proof that every sacrifice, including his wife's quiet unhappiness, had been worth it. His assistant followed him in, careful with her tone. "There was a delivery for you earlier. Legal documents." Nathan barely looked up. "Put it on the desk." Legal documents were routine. Contracts, NDAs, compliance reviews. Paper was just paper to him, something he signed and moved past. He scanned emails instead, skimming headlines, half smiling at a message from Madeline sent an hour earlier. Said last night was perfect. Call me when you're free. Free. The word amused him. In his mind, Elena was home, doing what she always did. Waiting. Resting. Carrying the child she said she wanted. He told himself she was safe, provided for, lucky. He told himself she needed him more than he needed her. That belief settled comfortably in his chest. When he finally picked up the envelope, his fingers paused. Not because he recognized the return address, but because the weight of it felt wrong. Too heavy. Too deliberate. He slid a Montblanc pen aside and opened the flap. The first page stopped his breath. Petition for dissolution of marriage. For a moment, the room went silent. The hum of the city disappeared. Nathan read the line again, slower this time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less threatening. They didn't. His jaw tightened. His first reaction wasn't guilt. It wasn't sadness. It was disbelief. She wouldn't, he muttered. Because in Nathan Cole's world, Elena Brooks wasn't the woman who left. She was the woman who endured, the woman who adjusted, the woman who stayed quiet so his life could stay loud. He didn't know it yet, but the life he thought was secure had already cracked. And the next page was about to shatter it completely. The message arrived at 11:43 a.m., while Elena Brooks was standing in line at a small pharmacy near her apartment. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. She almost ignored it. Unknown numbers had become common lately. Billing departments, automated reminders, people who wanted answers she didn't have. Elena glanced down out of habit, expecting nothing more than noise. Instead, she saw a name she recognized instantly. Madeline. The message was short, casual, intimate in a way that made Elena's chest tighten before her mind could catch up. Next time, let's stay longer. I hate sneaking out before sunrise. He says he's tired, but I know it's just his wife. The floor seemed to tilt. Elena didn't breathe at first. The hum of the pharmacy faded, replaced by a rushing sound in her ears. She read the sentence again, slower, as if it might dissolve into something harmless if she gave it time. It didn't. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, a reflex born of months of protecting something fragile. The baby shifted slightly, unaware that the world had just cracked open. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't intuition or insecurity or hormones. It was confirmation. Elena stepped out of line without speaking, ignoring the annoyed glance from the woman behind her. She walked outside into the cold air, leaning against the brick wall, as her body caught up with the truth her mind had already accepted. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Madeline. "Oh my God, please tell me that didn't go to you." Elena closed her eyes. There it was. Panic. Recognition. Proof. For a few seconds, she considered replying. 1,000 responses flashed through her mind. Anger, sarcasm, grief, confrontation. She imagined asking why, asking how long, asking what she had done wrong, but she typed nothing. Instead, she took a screenshot. Then another. She opened her email and forwarded the images to Rachel and Nguyen with a single line. "She sent this by mistake." Rachel replied within minutes. "Don't answer. Don't block her. Save everything." Elena slid the phone back into her coat pocket, her hand steady now in a way that surprised her. The pain was still there, sharp and deep, but something else had surfaced beneath it. Clarity. Nathan hadn't just betrayed her. He had lied so easily that another woman felt comfortable mocking her existence. That realization didn't break Elena. It hardened her. Inside a midtown office tower, Nathan Cole was still smiling, still confident, still unaware that one careless message had shifted the balance of power completely. Because Elena Brooks no longer needed to guess. She had the truth in writing. And that truth was about to cost him far more than he imagined. What Elena didn't know yet was that this message was only the smallest crack in a lie that was about to collapse from every direction. Nathan didn't come home that night. At least, not in the way he used to. Elena heard the door open close to midnight, the quiet click of expensive shoes placed carefully by the wall, the practiced silence of a man who didn't want questions. She stayed in bed, eyes open in the dark, one hand resting over her stomach, listening to him move through the apartment as if she were already a ghost. The next morning, control arrived disguised as concern. Nathan stood in the kitchen scrolling through his phone, coffee untouched, voice calm and measured. "I think it's better if I handle the finances for now," he said casually. "You've been stressed. Pregnancy does that." Elena didn't answer right away. He continued, not looking at her. "I froze the joint account, just temporarily. It's nothing personal. I just want to make sure everything's..." Stable. Stable. By noon, her credit card declined at the grocery store. By evening, her access to shared cloud files was gone. Her email password no longer worked. The small safety net she hadn't realized she relied on disappeared one thread at a time. When she finally asked him, quietly, carefully, Nathan sighed as if she were exhausting him. "You're overreacting," he said. "I'm trying to protect us. You should be resting, not worrying about money you don't need to touch." Us. The word felt hollow now. That night, Elena sat on the edge of the couch, laptop open, staring at a blank screen where her resume used to live. Years of experience, erased with a single password change. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Nathan. So please don't make this harder than it needs to be. She felt something shift inside her chest. Not panic, not fear. Recognition. This wasn't love. It was leverage. She opened a notebook and began writing everything down. Dates, accounts, conversations she had once dismissed, the moments she'd been told to stay quiet for the family. Each word steadied her breathing. Later, in the bathroom, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired. Smaller, somehow. But her eyes were clearer than they had been in months. She whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "He thinks I have nowhere to go." Her phone vibrated again, this time with a message from Rachel. "Did he restrict access yet?" Elena typed back one word. "Yes." Rachel's response came immediately. "Good. That means he's scared." Elena closed her eyes, a hand returning to her stomach as the baby moved gently, reminding her why this mattered. Nathan believed control would silence her. He didn't realize it was the moment she stopped being afraid. Elena met Rachel Nguyen 3 days later in a quiet cafe just off Lexington Avenue. It wasn't a dramatic reunion. No hugs, no gasps, just two women sitting across from each other at a small corner table, steam rising from untouched cups as the city rushed past the window like nothing was wrong. Rachel was the first to speak. "You look thinner." Elena gave a tired smile. "I feel clearer." Rachel studied her for a moment longer, the way she always had back when they worked in the same office years ago. Back then, Elena had been sharp, analytical, the kind of mind people underestimated until it was too late. Rachel hadn't forgotten that version of her. "Tell me everything," Rachel said. So Elena did. She didn't cry. She didn't exaggerate. She laid out the facts the way she used to present risk assessments, dates, behaviors, financial shifts, the message from Madeline, the frozen accounts. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression tightening with every detail. When Elena finished, there was a long pause. Then Rachel said quietly, "He didn't just cheat on you." Elena looked up. "He isolated you. Financially, professionally, emotionally." "That matters," Rachel continued. "Judges don't ignore patterns like this anymore." Elena swallowed. "He thinks I'm dependent." Rachel nodded. "Men like him always do." She pulled out a slim folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Inside were blank forms, checklists, timelines. "But this isn't about revenge," Rachel said. "It's about safety. Yours and the baby's. We move carefully. We document everything. And we don't warn him." Elena's hands trembled as she touched the folder. Not from fear, from relief. "For months," she said quietly, "everyone treated me like I was fragile, like I couldn't handle the truth." Rachel's voice softened. "You're not fragile. You were contained." Something in Elena's chest cracked open. Not pain this time, but release. Rachel leaned forward. "One more thing you need to understand. Once he realizes he's losing control, he will escalate." Elena nodded slowly. "I know." "And when he does," Rachel added, "you won't be alone." As Elena stood to leave, she felt the baby move again, steady and strong. For the first time since the truth came out, she allowed herself a small, dangerous thought. Oh, maybe this wasn't the end of her life. Maybe this was the moment it quietly began again. The deeper Rachel looked, the quieter the room became. They were seated at Elena's small dining table, papers spread out in neat rows. Elena's old laptop humming softly as Rachel scrolled through bank statements and archived emails Elena had managed to recover. Outside, traffic moved on, indifferent. Inside, something far more dangerous was taking shape. "This doesn't line up," Rachel said finally. Elena's stomach tightened. "What doesn't?" Rachel turned the screen toward her. "These transfers, they're not random. They're timed. Always after you signed something. Always using your name." Elena stared at the numbers, her mind struggling to connect them. "My name how?" "As authorization," Rachel replied. "Your digital signature, your old credentials. He didn't just cut you off, he used you." The words landed heavier than any confession of infidelity ever could. Rachel continued, her voice low but precise. "Nathan routed personal expenses and high-risk payments through accounts that list you as a secondary approver. On paper, it looks like joint decisions. If anything gets flagged, the liability doesn't stop with him." Elena felt cold spread through her chest. "He told me it was paperwork," she whispered. "He said it was easier if I signed because I was already listed." Rachel nodded. "That's how this works. He needed insulation, and you were convenient." The baby moved sharply, as if reacting to the tension in Elena's body. She pressed her palm to her stomach, fighting the sudden wave of nausea. "So if this explodes," Elena said slowly, "he planned to let it fall on me." "Yes," Rachel said without hesitation. "And he assumed you'd never notice, or that you'd be too scared to fight back." For a long moment, Elena said nothing. She thought about the nights she'd trusted him blindly, the way he'd smiled while handing her documents, the tone he used when he said, "It's just routine." That realization hurt more than Madeline ever could. Rachel closed the laptop. "This is no longer just a divorce. This is exposure, and it changes everything." Elena looked up. Her voice was steady now. "What do we do?" Rachel met her gaze. "We document, we protect you, and we make sure the truth surfaces in the right order." Elena nodded once. That night, alone in bed, she stared at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around her. She finally understood what she was up against. Nathan hadn't just betrayed her heart. He had gambled with her future. And for the first time since all of this began, Elena wasn't just leaving. She was preparing to survive and make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else again. By the end of that week, Elena Brooks had lost almost everything that once made her feel anchored. Her phone rang less. Messages stopped. Even the polite check-ins from Nathan's family disappeared, replaced by silence so complete it felt intentional. When she tried to log into her professional certification portal, the password had been changed. When she opened her email, half her folders were gone. Years of work, contacts, references, proof she had ever mattered outside that apartment, vanished without warning. Nathan didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply erased her. The final blow came on a Friday afternoon, when Elena checked the mailbox downstairs and found a formal notice addressed to her name. Not from a court, not from a bank, from the building management. Her lease, once guaranteed under Nathan's income, was now under review. Until further notice, her residency status was conditional. She stood in the lobby holding the letter, the weight of it sinking into her chest. Around her, people came and went, carrying groceries, laughing into phones, living lives that hadn't collapsed overnight. For the first time since everything began, Elena felt the fear break through. Not fear of Nathan, fear of the future. That night, she sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the couch, surrounded by boxes she hadn't realized she'd started packing. The baby kicked softly, as if asking why she was so still. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I promise." Her phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. "We should talk. This is getting out of hand." Out of hand. As if her life were a mess he had to clean up. She didn't reply. Instead, she called Rachel. "I don't know how much longer I can hold this together," Elena admitted, her voice cracking for the first time. Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. "This is the pressure point. He's trying to break you before court. If you fold now, he wins everything." Elena closed her eyes. "And if I don't?" Rachel paused. "Then it's going to get worse before it gets better." After the call ended, Elena sat alone in the dark, listening to the distant sirens, the hum of the city that didn't care who survived and who didn't. For a brief, terrifying moment, she wondered if Nathan had been right, once if she really had nothing without him. Then the baby moved again, stronger this time. Elena inhaled deeply and stood up. She had nothing left to lose, and that, she realized, made her more dangerous than Nathan had ever imagined. Elena signed the papers at dawn. The city outside her window was still half asleep, wrapped in a gray silence that made everything feel suspended. She sat at the small kitchen table, wearing an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back without care. The documents were spread neatly in front of her, clipped and organized the way Rachel had taught her to do it. No rush, no shaking hands, no room for doubt. This wasn't an emotional moment. That surprised her. She had imagined tears, panic, a last-minute urge to call Nathan, to ask for explanations that would change nothing. Instead, there was only a steady calm, the kind that settles in after grief has already burned through everything soft. She read each page slowly. Name, address, marriage date, separation terms. When she reached the final signature line, her hand paused for just a second. Not from fear, but from memory. A flash of who she used to be. A woman who believed commitment meant endurance, who thought staying silent was the same as being strong. That woman was gone. Elena signed. The pen made a quiet scratching sound, final and irreversible. She exhaled, feeling the baby shift, as if responding to the release in her body. "I'm choosing us," she said aloud. Later that morning, she dressed carefully. Nothing dramatic. Just clean jeans, a coat, flat shoes that didn't hurt her back. She packed the envelope herself, sealing it with deliberate pressure, writing the address in clear, a confident handwriting. She didn't send it from her building. She walked 3 blocks to a courier office, waited her turn, and requested signature confirmation. When the clerk asked if it was urgent, Elena nodded. "Yes," she said. "Very." As she stepped back onto the sidewalk, her phone buzzed. Nathan's name lit up the screen. She stared at it for a moment, then turned the phone face down. He didn't get to interrupt this. By the time she reached home, the confirmation email had already arrived. Scheduled, tracked, unavoidable. That afternoon, Elena rested on the couch, one hand on her stomach, the other on the thin folder Rachel had left behind. Outside, the city moved as usual, horns, footsteps, strangers arguing about nothing. Inside, a door had closed forever. Nathan still believed he could talk his way out, and he still believed she would hesitate. He was wrong. Because once the papers were sent, Elena Brooks was no longer preparing to leave. She had already left, and the next move would happen without her ever raising her voice. The envelope was waiting for Nathan Cole when he returned to his office after lunch. It sat perfectly centered on his desk, thicker than any contract he had signed that year, the edges squared, the paper heavy enough to demand attention. His assistant stood near the door, hands folded, eyes carefully neutral. "Legal courier required a signature," she said. "Marked urgent." Nathan nodded once, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. He was irritated, not alarmed. Legal matters followed him everywhere. This was the price of power. He loosened his tie, dropped into his chair, and reached for the envelope without urgency. Then he saw the sender, Elena Brooks. His fingers tightened. For a brief moment, he considered not opening it. Control meant choosing timing. Control meant refusing to react. But something about the weight of the package unsettled him, and he tore it open with more force than necessary. The first page slid out. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Nathan stared at the words, his mind rejecting them outright. Divorce didn't fit the narrative he had built. Elena was upset, yes, emotional, pregnant. But divorce was a threat she wasn't supposed to make. He flipped the page, and the next. Court dates, temporary orders, financial disclosures, a request for sole physical custody. His breath slowed, then stopped. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a bluff. This was prepared. Nathan leaned back in his chair, scanning the room as if someone might be watching him crack. The office around him looked the same: glass walls, muted colors, framed awards. But suddenly it felt smaller, exposed. His phone buzzed. A message from Madeline. "Did you see the news about the audit rumors? Call me." Audit rumors. Nathan's pulse jumped. He looked back at the envelope and noticed something he had missed before. A second folder. Inside it, neatly clipped, were documents he recognized immediately. Transactions. Approvals. His approvals. Except they weren't only his. Elena's name appeared again and again. His mouth went dry. This wasn't just divorce. This was evidence. Nathan reached for his phone, his confidence cracking for the first time in years. He needed to call her, to fix this, to control the damage. But as his finger hovered over her name, and he realized something chilling. Elena hadn't sent these papers to start a conversation. She had sent them to end one. And now, every move he made would be watched. What Nathan didn't realize yet was that the envelope on his desk was already being discussed far beyond that office. Nathan Cole moved fast. By 3 p.m., his office door was closed, blinds drawn, phone pressed to his ear as his legal team assembled on speaker. His voice was controlled, measured, the way it always sounded when he believed he could still steer the outcome. "She's emotional," he said calmly. 7 months pregnant, under stress. I want this framed carefully." On the other end, his attorney hesitated. "The filings are thorough. This doesn't look impulsive." Nathan ignored that. "I want an emergency motion, temporary custody evaluation, or psychological assessment if necessary." He said it without hesitation. In his mind, this was strategy, not cruelty. If Elena felt threatened enough, she would fold. She always had. Within hours, the first message went out, not to Elena, but to his circle. "She's unstable," he told his sister. "She's being influenced," he told a colleague. "She's overreacting," he told himself. That evening, Elena received the notice. Not a call, not a conversation, a formal email. Nathan was requesting a court-ordered mental health evaluation, citing erratic behavior and concerning decisions made without consultation. Elena read the email once, then again. Her hands didn't shake this time. She forwarded it to Rachel with a single sentence. "He's doing exactly what you said," Rachel replied almost immediately. "Good. This confirms intent." Still, when the apartment grew quiet that night, the weight of it pressed in. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, the glow of her phone lighting the room, and allowed herself one small moment of fear. Not for herself, for her child. What if the court believed him? What if money spoke louder than truth? Her breath grew shallow until the baby moved again. A slow, steady reminder that she wasn't fighting for pride anymore. She was fighting for safety. Across the city, Nathan poured himself a drink and stood by his window, watching traffic far below. He told himself he was doing what had to be done. That power required difficult choices. But beneath the confidence, something else stirred. Uncertainty. Because Elena hadn't reacted the way she was supposed to. No angry calls, no desperate messages, no tears to exploit. Just silence. And silence, so Nathan was beginning to realize, was far more dangerous than panic. What he didn't know was that his counterattack had already triggered protections he couldn't undo, and the court would soon see his move for exactly what it was. The court notice arrived the next morning, but it wasn't the threat Nathan thought it would be. Elena read it at her kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the paperwork, her posture straight, her breathing calm. The language was formal, intimidating by design. Requests for evaluation, concerns raised, insinuations carefully wrapped in legal phrasing. A lesser version of herself might have crumpled under the weight of it. This version didn't. She picked up her phone and called Rachel. "He's trying to paint me as unstable," Elena said evenly. Rachel's voice was calm on the other end. "We expected that. Now we show them who you actually are." That afternoon, Elena opened a folder she hadn't touched in years. Inside were remnants of her former life, certifications, performance reviews, risk models she'd built from scratch, emails praising her judgment during volatile market periods, back when she worked 12-hour days and people listened when she spoke, back when Nathan introduced her as brilliant instead of sensitive. Rachel reviewed the documents carefully. "Do you know how rare this is?" she said. "A documented pattern of professional competence combined with documented isolation afterward?" Elena swallowed. "He asked me to step back, for the family." Rachel nodded. "And that decision will matter. Judges care about context, about power dynamics." For the first time, Elena began to understand the shape of the fight ahead, not as chaos, but as structure, evidence, timelines, cause and effect. That evening, she drafted a personal statement for the court. Not emotional, not defensive, just truthful. She wrote about stepping away from her career at her husband's request, about financial access being removed without warning, about discovering the affair through a message not meant for her, about choosing legal channels instead of confrontation. She didn't accuse, she explained. When she finished, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Confidence. Across the city, Nathan reviewed his own filings, pacing his office, frustration bleeding through his composure. His lawyers warned him to be cautious, to slow down. "She's not reacting," one of them said. "That's unusual." Nathan scoffed. "What, she doesn't have the stomach for this?" He didn't see the irony, because while Nathan was preparing to overpower Elena with resources, Elena was doing something far more dangerous. She was reminding the system who she had always been. And once that truth entered the record, it would be impossible to erase. What Nathan still failed to grasp was that this case was no longer about control. It was about credibility, and Elena Brooks had far more of it than he did. The first crack didn't come from court. It came from the boardroom. Nathan Cole walked into the conference room on Park Avenue expecting routine approval. The long table was already filled. Partners, compliance officers, legal counsel. Laptops were open, coffee untouched. The air felt heavier than usual, quieter. Nathan took his seat, smoothing his jacket. "Let's move quickly," he said. "I have another call in 20 minutes." No one responded. Instead, the head of compliance slid a folder across the table toward him. "We need clarification," she said carefully, "regarding several transactions flagged during an internal review." Nathan's smile didn't move. I wasn't informed of an audit." "This isn't an audit," another partner replied. "Yet." Nathan opened the folder. His chest tightened almost immediately. Dates, amounts, authorizations. Too familiar. "These are routine expense reallocations," he said. "Approved under joint authority." The compliance officer nodded. "That's exactly the issue. The secondary approver listed is your wife." The room went still. Nathan felt heat rise to his neck. "She hasn't worked here in years." "That's what raised concern," the officer continued. "We received documentation yesterday indicating she may not have been aware of how her credentials were used." Nathan's pulse spiked. "Documentation from who?" he asked sharply. The partner at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "From legal counsel representing Mrs. Cole." The words landed like a blow. This wasn't public. This wasn't loud. This was surgical. Nathan leaned back, forcing a calm he no longer felt. "This is a personal matter being dragged into corporate space." "No," the partner replied. "It's a risk exposure issue, and we're obligated to address it." Across the city, Elena sat quietly in Rachel's office, hands folded, listening as Rachel explained what had just been set in motion. "They're not accusing him," Rachel said. "They're protecting themselves." Elena nodded. She understood that language now. Protection. Liability. Distance. Back in the boardroom, Nathan realized something chilling. For the first time, the people who had always backed him were no longer standing beside him. They were measuring how far they needed to step away. And that meant one thing. The story he had controlled for years was starting to be told without him. What Nathan didn't know was that the questions being asked in that room would soon reach places even his influence couldn't follow. Elena felt the baby move just as she finished reading the email from Rachel. Not a sharp kick. Not panic. A slow, deliberate shift. Steady. Grounding. Like a reminder. She placed both hands over her stomach and closed her eyes, breathing through the tightness in her chest. For days, everything had been strategy and survival. Documents. Timelines. Risk. But in that quiet moment, unstripped of lawyers and boardrooms, she was simply a mother, trying to protect a life that trusted her completely. Later that afternoon, she attended a prenatal appointment alone. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Other couples sat together, fingers intertwined, murmuring about baby names and nursery colors. Elena kept her eyes on the floor, not out of shame, but out of focus. She didn't need to compare lives anymore. When the nurse asked gently, "Will the father be joining you today?" Elena paused. "No," she answered. "He won't." The nurse didn't press. She only smiled and said, "You're doing great." During the ultrasound, the technician turned the screen slightly so Elena could see. A heartbeat. Strong. Consistent. Alive. Tears slipped down Elena's temples, silent and unstoppable. I promise," she whispered under her breath, barely audible. "I will not let him grow up thinking control is love." That evening, back in her apartment, Elena recorded a short video on her phone. It wasn't for social media. It wasn't for court. It was for her child. "If you ever wonder why I chose the hard road," she said softly, "it's because I wanted you to grow up free, even if that meant I had to be brave before I felt ready." She saved the file and locked it away. Across town, Madeline Shaw sat alone in a sleek apartment, scrolling nervously through her phone. Messages from Nathan had stopped. Whispers were circulating. Quiet ones. Dangerous ones. She opened a group chat with friends and typed without thinking. "I didn't know he was using his wife like that, I swear." The message lingered for half a second too long. Then it sent. Madeline's eyes widened. She tried to delete it. Too late. Because sometimes the most devastating truths don't come from investigations or courtrooms. They come from careless moments, when someone forgets to protect themselves. And that single message was already moving toward the one place neither Nathan nor Madeline could control anymore. Nathan Cole showed up at Elena's building just after sunset. He didn't announce himself. He didn't text first. He stood in the narrow hallway outside her apartment, suit jacket wrinkled for the first time she could remember, jaw tight, eyes sharp with something close to panic. Elena saw him through the peephole. For a moment, her body reacted before her mind did. Muscle memory, the old instinct to brace herself. Then she straightened, unlocked only the security latch, and opened the door a few inches. Nathan didn't smile. "We need to talk," he said, voice low, urgent. "Now." "There's nothing to talk about," Elena replied calmly. His gaze dropped to her stomach, then flicked back to her face. "You don't get to do this alone. You're making things worse." Elena studied him. The man who once controlled every room now looked uncertain, crowded by walls he couldn't buy his way out of. "You should leave," she said. Nathan laughed sharply. "Don't act like you're in charge. You think you won something? You don't even understand what you've started." She didn't raise her voice. "I understand exactly what I started." That's when he snapped. "You wouldn't survive 5 minutes without me," he hissed. "You don't have the money. You don't have the connections. Everyone knows you're unstable." The word hung in the air. Elena felt it land and pass through her without sticking. "That's interesting," she said softly, "because the board didn't seem to think so." Nathan froze. "What did you say?" he demanded. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Once, then again. He glanced at the screen, color draining from his face. Madeline. Multiple messages. Missed calls. Then an email notification preview flashed across the top of his screen. "Regarding your wife. Screenshots attached." Nathan's hand tightened around the phone. Elena watched as the shift happened, the exact moment he realized the ground beneath him was gone. "You did this," he said, voice cracking with anger and fear. "No," Elena replied. "You did." She leaned slightly against the doorframe, steady, unafraid. "I just stopped covering for you." For a long second, Nathan looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he stepped back. Not because she asked, because he understood something far worse than rejection. He had lost control, and there was nothing he could do to get it back. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt heavier than silence, like the walls themselves were listening. Street light spilled through the window, painting soft lines across the ceiling as she lay on her side, one arm curved protectively around her stomach. The baby moved again. Slow, intentional. Elena inhaled and let the air settle deep in her chest. She had spent days being strong for courts, for lawyers, for systems that demanded clarity and proof. But here, alone in the dark, she allowed herself to be something else. Honest. "I know this is scary," she whispered, on her voice barely sound. "It's scary for me, too." The baby kicked gently, not in distress, but presence, a reminder that she wasn't imagining the stakes. This wasn't theory or pride or revenge. This was a life that would one day ask questions she needed to be able to answer. She thought about the kind of home she wanted to build. Not a perfect one, not a rich one, a safe one. She imagined a future where silence wasn't used as punishment, where love didn't come with conditions, where control wasn't mistaken for care. She imagined bedtime stories, laughter in small kitchens, a child who didn't learn fear by watching it. Tears slid quietly into her hair. "I will never teach you to stay where you're hurt," she said, "even if leaving costs me everything." The fear that had followed her for weeks loosened its grip, not because the danger was gone, but because her reason was stronger than it. Across the city, Nathan sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The lights of the skyline no longer impressed him. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages he didn't answer. He replayed Elena's calm voice in his head, unable to reconcile it with the woman he thought he knew. He had underestimated her, and now he was running out of places to hide. Back in her apartment, Elena finally closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. For the first time since the truth came out, sleep found her. Not as escape, but as rest. Tomorrow would bring more conflict, more pressure, more consequences. But tonight, she had made a promise, and that promise was unbreakable. Well, what Elena didn't know was that someone unexpected had just stepped into the story, and the next day would change the balance completely. Elena was folding laundry when Rachel called. Her tone was different this time, measured, alert. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "Someone reached out this morning, not from Nathan's side." Elena stopped what she was doing. "Who?" "A man named Daniel Wright." The name stirred something distant, familiar but out of place. "He's an independent investor," Rachel continued. "Low profile. He asked to speak to me after seeing internal chatter about Nathan's situation. He says he recognizes your name." Elena's heart skipped. "From where?" Rachel paused. "From 6 years ago. A risk review you led. He was about to enter a leveraged deal everyone else approved. You flagged it. Quietly. It saved him millions." Elena sank into a chair. She remembered that case. The long nights, the pressure to sign off, the meeting where she'd spoken once, and watched the room change. "I didn't know he remembered," Elena said. "He remembered," Rachel replied. "And he's paying attention now." An hour later, Daniel Wright joined a video call. He was calm, unpolished, no rehearsed charm, just steady eyes and a voice that didn't rush. "I won't waste your time," he said. "I know you're in the middle of something difficult. I also know what it costs to tell the truth in rooms that prefer silence." Elena said nothing. Daniel continued. "Nathan tried to use your credibility as a shield. That tells me he knows exactly how valuable you are." Elena felt a flicker of anger, and something else, validation. "I'm not here to rescue you," Daniel added. "You don't need that. But I am here to support the truth. If this escalates, I'm willing to testify to your competence, your integrity, the professional history he tried to erase." Rachel watched Elena carefully. Elena inhaled. "Why?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because someone once did that for me, and because systems only change when people stop pretending they don't see." When the call ended, Elena sat quietly, hands resting over her stomach. For weeks, she had felt hunted, cornered, alone. Now, for the first time, she felt something shift. Not relief, but balance. Nathan had power, but Elena was no longer standing by herself. And somewhere in the city, Nathan Cole was about to learn a hard truth. Control collapses the moment witnesses step forward. And this time, the witnesses weren't afraid. The fallout reached Nathan Cole faster than he expected. By Monday morning, the whispers he once controlled had turned into formal emails. His calendar, once packed weeks in advance, began to empty in quiet, deliberate blocks. Meetings were postponed. Calls went unanswered. Even the assistants who used to orbit his office with practiced efficiency now avoided eye contact. At 9:30 a.m., compliance requested another meeting. This time, legal was present. Nathan sat at the long table, shoulders squared, expression carefully neutral. He had survived storms before. Bad press, market dips, angry partners. He told himself this was no different. It was. "We've reviewed additional materials," the compliance officer said, sliding a new folder across the table, "including third-party statements." Nathan opened it. Daniel Wright's name sat at the top. His throat tightened. The statement was concise, factual, devastating. Daniel outlined Elena's role in past risk assessments, her independent judgment, her documented resistance to questionable approvals. He described how Nathan had attempted to override her findings, and how those warnings later proved correct. This wasn't emotional testimony. It was professional credibility, weaponized by truth. Nathan looked up. This is a personal vendetta. The legal counsel shook her head. It's corroboration. Silence followed. Then the senior partner spoke, his voice calm but distant. Nathan, we're placing you on temporary leave pending further review. The word landed hard. Temporary, Nathan repeated. For now, the partner replied. We need to protect the firm. Protect, the same word Nathan had used when he froze Elena out of her own life. Across the city, Elena received the update from Rachel while sitting on a park bench, winter sunlight warming her face. She listened quietly, hands folded over her stomach, heart steady. He's been sidelined, Rachel said. Not fired, but exposed. Elena closed her eyes. She didn't feel joy. She felt balance. That afternoon, Madeline Shaw packed a suitcase in a rush, her phone lighting up with unanswered calls. Doors she once walked through easily were closing just as fast. Invitations vanished. Silence followed her instead of admiration. Karma didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with absence. That evening, Nathan stood alone in his office, staring at a city that no longer bent for him. For the first time, he understood what Elena had felt for months. Powerless. And somewhere beyond his reach, Elena Brooks was no longer surviving. She was reclaiming her life, piece by piece. What Nathan didn't know was that the final reckoning wouldn't come from the board or the court, but from the one thing he never learned to face: consequences without escape. Elena didn't celebrate when the court ruling arrived. She read it slowly, sitting at the same small kitchen table where everything had begun. Temporary sole physical custody, financial access restored, protective orders clearly outlined. The language was formal, restrained, but every line carried weight. It was acknowledgement. Not of pain, of truth. Rachel's voice was calm on the phone. This doesn't end the case, but it secures you. Housing, support, decision-making authority. Elena closed her eyes. For weeks, survival had demanded constant vigilance. Now, so for the first time, she felt space open up inside her chest. Not victory. Relief. That afternoon, she walked through Central Park, coat zipped against the cold, the city moving around her with familiar indifference. She watched children chase pigeons, couples argue quietly on benches, joggers counting miles. Ordinary life, unaware that hers had been returned piece by piece. Her phone buzzed. Daniel Wright. Rachel said the ruling came through, he wrote. I'm glad. Elena hesitated, then replied. Thank you for stepping forward. His response came quickly. You earned it long before this. They met days later at a quiet cafe overlooking the park. No expectations, no grand gestures. Just two people sitting across from each other, talking about work, about ethics, and about the strange cost of telling the truth early in rooms that reward silence. Daniel never asked her to be grateful. That mattered. Meanwhile, Nathan's world continued shrinking. His accounts were monitored, his access restricted. Invitations stopped coming. Friends avoided uncomfortable conversations. The life he built on dominance now demanded accountability, and he had no leverage left to trade. For Elena, the rewards weren't flashy. They were foundational: autonomy, safety, dignity. She signed a short-term consulting contract, remote, flexible, on her terms. She furnished a new apartment with light and air, and no memories she needed to outrun. She attended appointments without fear of being watched. And one evening, sitting on her couch with Daniel beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of the baby inside her, Elena understood something quietly profound. She hadn't been saved. She had been restored. And in reclaiming her life, she had gained something no court could grant. Peace that came from choosing herself without apology. Elena didn't expect love to feel this quiet. There were no dramatic confessions, no promises made under pressure, no urgency to define what didn't need labels yet. Daniel never tried to step into the role Nathan had vacated. He didn't offer protection like a shield or solutions like bargaining chips. He simply showed up, consistently, calmly, without agenda. They took walks in the late afternoon, when the city softened and the noise faded into background rhythm. Sometimes they talked about work. Sometimes about books Daniel kept stacked beside his couch. Often, they walked in silence, comfortable enough to let it stay that way. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the river, Elena broke the quiet. "I'm not fragile," she said suddenly. Daniel didn't look surprised. "I know." She turned toward him. "But I'm also not ready to be rescued. I need to know that if I choose someone, it's because I want them, not because I need them to survive." Daniel met her gaze. "That's exactly why I'm here." That answer stayed with her. Weeks passed. The baby grew stronger. Elena's life found rhythm again. Work on her terms, evenings without dread, mornings that didn't begin with negotiation. And through all of it, Daniel remained steady, never pushing, never retreating. The first time he reached for her hand, it was instinctive. Not a claim, not a question. Just contact. She didn't pull away. Across town, Nathan watched the world continue without him. His attempts to regain footing failed quietly. The systems he once manipulated no longer bent. His name no longer carried the same weight. Consequences followed him now, slow and unavoidable. One afternoon, Elena received a message from his attorney, an attempt at renegotiation. She read it once, then deleted it. That chapter was closed. That night, as Elena rested on Daniel's couch, the baby's movements slow and rhythmic, Daniel spoke softly. "Whatever you decide for the future," he said, "I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." Elena smiled, a warmth settling in her chest. For the first time, love didn't feel like risk. It felt like choice, and that made all the difference. She hadn't escaped one life to be carried into another. She had walked into something new, on her own feet, and with her heart fully intact. Elena's wedding was small. No ballroom, no headlines, no spectacle meant to prove anything to anyone else. It took place on a quiet spring morning, under pale trees just beginning to bloom, the air clean with the promise of new starts. She wore a simple dress that moved easily when she walked. Daniel stood beside her, steady and calm, not as a savior, not as a replacement, but as a man who had waited until she chose him freely. When she spoke her vows, her voice didn't tremble. "I promise to walk beside you," she said, "not behind you, and not ahead of you, only beside." Daniel smiled, eyes warm. "That's all I've ever wanted." Their child slept peacefully in a bassinet nearby, surrounded by quiet laughter and soft sunlight. Protected. Loved. Free from the shadows that once threatened to define Elena's life. Across the city, Nathan Cole watched a different future unfold. His appeal stalled. His reputation never fully recovered. Invitations dried up. Deals went elsewhere. People remembered, not the man he tried to present, but the patterns he couldn't erase. He learned the hardest lesson too late. Power without integrity collapses inward. No one needed to punish him. Life already had. Elena never spoke his name again. She didn't need closure from someone who no longer had access to her peace. Her days filled with meaningful work, chosen family, and a love that grew without fear. Mornings began without anxiety. Evenings ended without apologies. And the child she once protected inside her now laughed freely in rooms that felt safe. One night, sitting on the porch with Daniel, Elena watched the lights dim across the neighborhood and realized something quietly extraordinary. The life she once begged for understanding had finally answered her, not with explanations, with fulfillment. She had lost a marriage built on control and gained a life built on choice. That was the reward no courtroom could grant. That was the justice that lasted. Because sometimes, the most satisfying ending isn't watching the villain fall. It's watching the woman rise, whole, loved, and finally at peace. So, the story has come to a close. And if you're still here with us at this moment, truly still here, then maybe, just maybe, something in this journey has touched your heart in a quiet but real way. What Elena's story reminds us is not about revenge or winning louder than someone else. It's about choosing yourself when it's hardest, and understanding that dignity is not something anyone can give or take away. It's something you claim. The Stoics believed this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Elena didn't control what was done to her, but she controlled how she responded, and that changed everything. Life will test us with betrayal, fear, and moments where silence feels safer than truth. But as Epictetus taught, circumstances don't make the man, they only reveal him. Hard moments reveal who we are becoming, not who we are failing to be. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like walking away without shouting. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace over proving a point. And sometimes, it looks like trusting that a better chapter will meet you when you stop settling for less than respect. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, empower, and remind us we're not alone, and it's never too late to rise. This story is a work of fiction created for storytelling, reflection, and emotional inspiration. Any names, characters, businesses, locations, or events portrayed are entirely fictional and used solely to convey themes related to personal growth, resilience, and healing. The situations described are not intended to represent real individuals or actual legal cases. While the emotions and challenges shown may feel realistic and relatable, they are shared to encourage thoughtful discussion rather than to provide legal, medical, or financial advice. Viewers should understand that real-life situations can vary widely, and outcomes depend on individual circumstances. This content is designed to explore human experiences, moral choices, and emotional strength through narrative storytelling. If this story resonates with you, we encourage you to reflect on its themes in a personal way and seek professional guidance when facing real-life challenges. Our goal is to inspire, not to mislead, and to create a safe space for meaningful stories and conversations.